Shalom to all. We're going to continue with our series of deeper insights into the Daf, and today we're looking at Pesachim Kuf Yud Tet. It's a fascinating story there, all about what's going to happen at the end of days, and we're going to ask a question on that and a bit of background from Tanakh, and hopefully we'll get some kind of answer at the end. So I sent earlier a source sheet, and I was going to try and send the shir as well, but unfortunately there were some technical difficulties, so the shir's coming out now a bit late. But those of you that still have the source sheet, you can use that to have a look. Basically, the Gemara in Pesachim says the following. It says the word Vayigamal in the Pasuk in Bereshit. It says, what does that mean? The Gemara says that in the end of days, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to make a beautiful Seudah for all the tzaddikim and chassidim, and on the day that he is Gomel Chesed to all the Jewish people, to Bnei Yitzchak. At that Seudah, he's going to come and he's going to ask someone to lead the benching. So he first goes to Avram Avinu and he says, "No, bench for me." Avram says, "I can't. I had Yishmael. I had a son that was so wicked." So he says, "Okay, Yitzchak, you lead us benching." Yitzchak says, "I can't. I also had a bad son. I had Esav." So Hashem goes to Yaakov and says, "Yaakov, please, honor us. Tolu varech, take the cup and bench for us." Yaakov says, "How can I? I married two sisters. And that, in the future, Hashem made that asa to marry two sisters whilst they're both still alive." So he says, "Okay, Moshe, no, you lead us in benching." Moshe says, "I can't. I didn't have the zechut, the merit to enter the land of Israel, not in my lifetime or in my after my death." Shows you the zechut of living in Eretz Israel, even being buried here. He said, "I can't. I didn't have that merit." So Hashem says, "No, Yehoshua, you do it. You lead us in benching." Yehoshua says, "How can I? I only had daughters. I didn't have a son, and they didn't inherit me in my portion of the land of Eretz Israel. So I can't do it either." So then finally Hashem goes to David and says, "No, David, will you lead us in benching?" And David says, "I'll lead you. It's fitting for me to lead you." On the surface, it seems like a beautiful bit of Agadata, but the question is brought by Rabbi Elyashiv, saying, "But David also had a wicked son. Why doesn't David turn around and say, 'I also had a wicked son, and I can't, I'm sorry, I can't leave'?" In Shmuel, Sefer Shmuel Bet, in Perek Yud Chet and Yud Tet, talks about the rebellion of Avshalom, the son of David. Avshalom was a wicked son. Wicked son. From early years, he used to rebel against his father. He wanted to kill his father. He raped his father's wives. He led a rebellion against David. David had to flee from Yerushalayim. A complete Rasha Merusha. He was completely off the derech. Why didn't David say something about that? That's a great question by Rabbi Elyashiv. And other questions, other people ask, what about the sin of Uriah Hitti that he killed for Bathsheba? Okay, so that we can answer. It's a machloket. There are some, Rabbeinu Tam, for example, says, no, all the Chayalim of David HaMelech gave their wives a get, complete get. And he was completely divorced from his wife before he left. So that's not a question. The question remains, what about Avshalom? What about his wicked son Avshalom? So in truth, we see the following. Gemara Sotah talks about how some of these tzaddikim, they had a strong quality, but their downfall was also that quality. So the Gemara brings Shimshon. He was very strong. But what happened at the end of his days? With his strength, he pushed the columns down, and the whole building fell on top of him and he died. Another example he gives was Avshalom. Avshalom was supposed to be the most beautiful man. He had long locks of hair. They used to cut once a year. And they used to weigh the hair. There would be 200 shekels of weight. It was so long. He was perfect from head to toe. Beautiful, beautiful man. but his hair was also his downfall. As we'll see in the Gemara, it says, this is just some context, Avshalom was now fighting and leading a rebellion against his father David. And he was now on his mule going through the forest. He comes across this big tree. The donkey goes under the tree, and because of his long locks of hair, his hair gets caught in the tree, and the donkey runs off from underneath him, and he's left there stranded, hanging in the middle, hanging off the tree by his hair. So, unfortunately for him, Yoav, the general of David's army, sees him, and he picks up 3 spears, the Torah tells us, and he ran across to kill Avshalom. Avshalom took out his knife to cut his hair down and set him free. And as he was about to do that, he looked at the floor and he saw the floor opened and the gates of Gehenna were open underneath him. So he was scared to cut his hair in case he fell into the gates of Gehenna. And what happened was Yoav took the spears and stabbed him through the heart of Avshalom and killed him. All the soldiers were happy. They were cheering. We've saved the king. We've killed his enemies. 2 messengers ran back to David to tell him the news. The first messenger said, yeah, we've won the battle. The second messenger tells him, what's happened to your son? David asked him, what's happened to my son? He was concerned about Avshalom. Even though he was a rebel, he was concerned. He said, what happened to my son? And the second messenger says, his end was the same as the end of all enemies of Hashem and the king. Basically hinting to him that he had been killed and died. At that moment, David breaks down in tears. One of the most passionate parts of this story. One of the most passionate, most bittersweet parts of the Tanakh, where David HaMelech, with all the soldiers outside waiting for David to come out and cheer them on and say, thank you. Look what you did. You saved my life. You defeated the enemies of the king. And rather what they're faced with is a king completely broken down in tears. He falls to the floor. He cries, he shouts his name. B'ni Avshalom, B'ni, B'ni. He says the word B'ni, my son, 8 times in the pasuk. Avshalom, Avshalom, B'ni, B'ni. Vayzag zaka gedola. He raises his voice, he weeps, he cries, he's shaking, he covers his face, he falls on the floor. He is completely destroyed by this news. And no one can understand him. And Yoav saying to him, you better be careful, David, or your soldiers are going to rebel against you soon. They're waiting for you to tell them what a good job they did. And instead they're going to see you crying and mourning the loss of Avshalom, who wanted to kill you. How can this be? But in truth, what we see is David never gave up. He never gave up hope in his son. His son was so off the derech. His son wanted to kill him. But when he heard that his son had been killed, it destroyed him. He didn't give up hope. He said, if only I could die for you, Avshalom B'ni. That's what he wanted. He would rather die instead of Avshalom, because that was his son ultimately. He was showing that he had unconditional love for his son. Doesn't matter what his son was going to do. And we know the Gemara Brachot, Daf Zayin, talks about how a wayward son, a son who goes off the derech, is more painful and it's more hurtful to the parents than the milchama of Gog and Magog. So what we see is really, this is the reason why David was chosen, in my opinion, to lead the Birkat HaMazon in the end of days. Because we're now living in a generation where unfortunately people go off the derech, people assimilate, people marry out. And even our own children, our own houses, I thank God at the moment I don't have this experience, and I bless all of us that we should never have this experience and we should never know of this. But the stories of children going off the derech are so many nowadays. You can find them so easily, these stories. And it's not just to irreligious people this happens. This happens to Rosh Yeshiva. This happens to rabbis. Their children go off the derech. The kid stays at home, he doesn't go to shul, he can't be bothered, he's not interested. He might not be doing, he's probably not doing it to hurt his parents, but he's doing it because he's upset, or something's happened to him, he needs the attention, whatever it is. So rather than shout and criticize our kids and tell them this is what you have to do because this is the dream you had at the Brit Milah of your son, you dreamed that he would be this big rabbi, and now he's not going out for Shacharit and he's not coming out to eat Sudat Shabbat with the family, and he wakes up at 2 in the afternoon and he comes down all groggy. Rather than criticizing and rather than shouting and rather than holding on to this dream we had of our children, what they were going to be, we need to deal with the reality, and we need to deal with them kindly, and we need to show them unconditional love, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that will bring them back with this huge amounts of love. We have to build them up rather than breaking them down. One example personally was, I remember going to shul once, and it was the late 80s, early 90s, I had this fluorescent orange shirt. I thought it was the bee's knees. Fluorescent orange. I walk into shul, to Dayan shul, thinking I was a big boss. Suddenly in came Dayan and he walked up to me and he said, "Josh, what a shirt. What a shirt." It's D&G actually, Rabbi, D&G. He said, he whispered in my ear at this point, and he said, "Josh, it's a beautiful shirt, but Josh Antian doesn't wear a fluorescent orange shirt to shul." So I took that on board, and I heard what he was saying. He wasn't criticizing me. He wasn't belittling me. He wasn't embarrassing me. He was building me up. He was showing me unconditional love. He agreed it was a great shirt. It was a lovely shirt, but he said, "A Josh Antin doesn't wear a fluorescent orange shirt to shul. You're more than that. You're better than that." And the only way we can convey that message to our kids and to other people is by showing them unconditional love. So I think that's why David HaMelech was chosen at the end to say Birkat HaMazon, because at the end of the day, the end of days, when all this is going on, the only way we can be Makar people is by showing unconditional love to each and every one of us. Each and every one of our children and each and every one of the Jewish people. So we should be zochen to be spared from that pain and that anguish, and we should walk in the ways of David HaMelech, who showed unconditional love for his son, even though his son wanted to kill him. I wish you all a great day.